Okay, now begins Endgame. What I have left to do is figure out how to mop up the Russian centers in the north in such a way that I will have an opportunity to get an 18th center. That 18th center, most realistically, is going to be either Tunis or Moscow, but potentially could be Venice, Vienna, or Warsaw. The Russian player said, "I'm going to do everything in my power to stop you from winning." And I kind of believe that. The Russian player said no more to me, and I don't expect us to talk again unless the Russian player changes strategies, maybe to try to throw me the game. I don't know if the Russian's the kind of player who would do that. I spoke to the Austrian quite a lot, but not about the game itself, or I mean, not prospectively. We talked a lot about what had happened in the game and revealing what we had thought at different moments and our opinions about whether certain moves were good or not, or our opinions of the players, all sorts of small talk, nothing important. And we even discussed how our press styles had changed. The Austrian player gave me his evaluation of when I was doing well or not so great in my press. All that stuff was just, as far as I can tell, each of us trying to establish rapport. And I genuinely had a lot of fun talking about it. It's unusual for me to go so deep into the retrospective during the middle of the match. I usually wait until the match is over. But that's fine. I wanted to show the Austrian that I was concentrating on the game. And the Austrian said, "Listen, I'm not going to throw you the game for nothing. You're going to have to earn it. I'm going to play and try to get into a stronger position as I can, but I'm not just going to let you win." And I said, "Understood. I never heard you quite say that, and I never asked you to throw me the win. But let's keep playing." And so I feel pretty good, especially after the Austrian built an army in Trieste. It's very clear that the Austrian intends to work with me and probably attack Italy now that the English player helped. The only request I got from the Austrian was, "Hey, don't move to Piedmont from Marseille. I don't need your help with the English fleet in Western Med harassing the Italians somehow. That's all I need to break his defenses. I would be suspicious of that." And I said, "That's fine, and I'm going to honor that request." So other than those conversations, which were pretty unimportant, the conversation with the Austrian was extensive, but it didn't have implications for how I would move my pieces. This is why I deem this turn to be the beginning of Endgame, because it's mostly about whether I can just outplay the Russian. There's not much to say, and whether I will outplay the Russian player well, whether I'll outplay him fast, and in such a way that I'll be able to win later on. So I had previously already figured out that I need to commit these units I've built, moving Kiel to Denmark and Berlin to Baltic Sea, so that I'll be able to make a supported attack on Sweden in autumn. And from there, I realized logically I need to move Skagerrak to North Sea, because if the Russian moves Norwegian to North Sea successfully, I'm in a horrible position. If the Russian bounces me in North Sea, that's just fine, because I'll still be able to make my supported attack on Sweden, no problem. And if the Russian lets me into North Sea, either by moving Norwegian to North Atlantic, or by convoying Edinburgh to Norway, or by moving into Norway, if any scenario where the Russian lets me into North Sea, that's just fine with me, because on the follow-up, I should be able to make my supported attack on Sweden and either move North Sea into Edinburgh, or perhaps break some support that might be in Norway using North Sea. So I feel pretty good about that. And then I thought, what is the Russian player going to do with Edinburgh and Liverpool? One scenario is that the Russian moves Norwegian to North Atlantic and Liverpool to Irish in an attempt to try to get into Mid-Atlantic Ocean. And I determined that my best way to counter that is that I would just retreat Mid-Atlantic Ocean into Portugal, or maybe into the Mediterranean, depending on what happens. I'm not too concerned about that. The other scenario is that the Russian player moves Liverpool to Wales and Edinburgh to Yorkshire to set up for a support attack on London. I determined that if I move London to Wales, pretty much that's advantageous no matter what happens. If Liverpool moves to Wales, then I've bounced that move and defended London for the rest of the year. If Russia moves to North Atlantic Ocean and Irish Sea, my move to Wales will be advantageous because I can threaten Liverpool or to poke Irish Sea and counter a support from there. So that'll be advantageous. And I thought about moving to Yorkshire, but because ending up in Wales is slightly more advantageous if the move actually succeeds, and I want to move my fleets westward for the possibility of getting Tunis later on, I decided that was the slightly better move. I thought really hard about whether I needed to bring Mid-Atlantic Ocean back into the north to try to get to North Atlantic Ocean or maybe the English Channel to help my forces fight. But I determined that strategically, that's just not the way to go. If I'm going to win this game, I'll probably have to make a play for Tunis at some point. And the reason for that is Tunis is a center on the other side of the stalemate line, but it's one that's being hotly contested. England and Italy, and to an extent Austria perhaps, will all be fighting over this area of the board, maybe for some time to come. And therefore, there's a possibility that someone might try to throw me the game, or that the defenses will be so mangled I'll be able to get through. So I really don't want my fleet to go back to the north. That's moving backwards. And since I determined that it was possible for me to defend all my centers for the rest of the year without doing that, I'd rather hold with my fleet in Mid-Atlantic Ocean. I didn't want to move it away in case Russia did make the move to send all fleets to North Atlantic and Irish. I thought about whether I should move Mid-Atlantic Ocean to somewhere like Spain, South Coast, or North Africa. But the vulnerability that I would have to Russia getting into Mid-Atlantic Ocean, it just seemed too frustrating. And bear in mind that the Russian player, even though I'm going to take centers from the Russian could very well disband fleets or units far, far away over in Anatolia, aka Turkey. Those could be the ones that Russia disbands. So even after Russia lose center after center, I could be fighting Russia's northern units for a long time. It could take a very long time for them all to get disbanded. I don't have an ability to surround and destroy them. So if Russia got into Mid-Atlantic Ocean, I feel like that could be a nuisance for a really long time. And even if Russia can make a forced move on Mid-Atlantic Ocean, then I would probably retreat that fleet. Towards the Mediterranean at that time and maybe cover Portugal with one of my armies. That's why I also want to hold with my army in Spain to keep my options open if I need to take Portugal. I know I promised Austria that I would keep England alive, but I won't necessarily honor that promise if the tactical situation looks kind of grim for me. The moves that I also decided to move Munich and Prussia to Berlin to bounce them off of each other to cover against Russia moving to either Berlin or Munich. It's tough to pass up moving Prussia to Livonia, especially when I know it's going to be uncontested and I'll threaten several Russian centers that way. But if Russia got into Munich or Berlin, that would make my life quite miserable, and I would probably not be able to solo win. I really have no way of clearing that unit out. And so the potential reward from being in Livonia is I get St. Petersburg faster, I can threaten Moscow years from now. That's not worth it to me compared to the potential loss. So I decided I need to defend that. I determined this quite a while back. The only moves that I really hemmed and hawed over was what to do with Brest. I could move it to Picardy and maybe set up for a convoy later on. Like I could move it to Belgium and then convoy onto Great Britain to clear out the Russian army there, or maybe to Norway to set up for an attack on St. Pete by army, which can have implications for getting Moscow later. But on the other hand, if I move it to Gascony and there's some kind of disaster regarding what's happening around Iberia, having the ability to fortify that area, to take Portugal and keep everything else defended, it seems slightly better. My preferred scenario is that I'm going to move Burgundy to Munich at the end of the turn in autumn, and then move Gascony to Burgundy to backfill. But in the off chance that that's not what I do, I think Gascony is the slightly better position. So this turn for me felt a lot more like an intense tactical game. Just, what is my read on the Russian? How do I value my moves? I pretty much trust the Austrian right now. So for me, this moment in the game really plays to my strengths because my tactical analysis is top, and I'm usually pretty good at making moves that can't be countered or correctly predict what the other player is going to do. And I think that I'll be able to do that against the Russian here. Let's see what happens. Well, on this turn, my former exuberance at the possibility that I might be able to get a win was dampened quite a lot by the grim reality of the tactical difficulty that I'm going to face in bringing down Russia, and my suspicion that Austria is not completely gung ho on actually inflicting rapid damage on Russia. I'll explain what happened diplomatically, which was very little. I tried to get Austria's acquiescence to my finishing off England by just taking Portugal so I would have a guaranteed build, because there is no way for me to guarantee that I'll get a capture off of Russia. Austria and I went back and forth about this a little bit, with Austria really not quite begging, not quite pressuring, but making it very clear that he was going to be frustrated or disappointed if I would not allow England to continue fighting. Made some pleas about how it would be fun to have England in the end game and think I don't care about any of that stuff. I play by realpolitik. So that stuff did not weigh on me. But what did weigh on me was the possibility that Austria might lose patience with me and focus on reuniting with Russia or stopping me somehow if it seemed like I was interfering with Austria's ability to finish off Italy. There's got to be some balance between us if we're going to play as allies. And for me to go to 12 while Austria lingers at 9 would probably not be that great for our cooperation. So I decided relatively early in the turn, in my analysis on making my moves, that all right, I'm going to let England linger on for Austria's sake. I really hope that that continues to keep Austria on my side. Otherwise, that's a waste of time. That's the only reason why I'm doing it, or a lost opportunity, I mean. And then I thought really hard about how I can fight Russia, and the tactical situation's quite a convoluted one. Even with my setup for the last turn, there actually is no way for me to make a guaranteed capture on Sweden. Russia played well and didn't exactly counter my moves, but there's no way for me to exploit Russia's position. So let's assume that I make a supported attack on Sweden and want to ensure that Norway cannot support Finland to Sweden by moving North Sea to Norway. Well, if Russia supports Norway to Sweden supported with Finland, Norway to Sweden supported by Finland, then all those moves fail. Russia counters me completely. So this is tough. That means, okay, I could try to counter Russia from making that play by allowing Russia to move into Sweden, in which case, hey, my fleet at North Sea would move to Norway and would go through. But Russia can further counter that by moving Norwegian Sea to Norway, blocking that move. And I can counter that defense by moving North Sea to Edinburgh. But Russia still has the ability to counter that by moving Norwegian to Edinburgh. So that means Russia can defend 2 out of 3 of Edinburgh, Norway, and Sweden. And boy, oh boy, is it a challenge for me to guess which one. For a long time, I entertained the idea of maybe trying to move Prussia to Livonia and Baltic Sea to Gulf of Bothnia to try to set up for a fight in Scandinavia later, while moving North Sea to Edinburgh and covering North Sea with Denmark, hoping that that might work, and if not, I'd get a better fight against Russia. But because of my suspicion that Austria is looking for opportunities down the line, I think that this was a very tough call, but I decided that it would be better to try to set up for future attacks by keeping my forces balled and consolidated rather than moving my army off by itself into Livonia, where it might be surrounded and destroyed and can't really be recalled for a defense so easily, especially if in conjunction with moving my fleet to Gulf of Bothnia. So I decided to move Denmark to Skagerrak, a move that can't be stopped, and convoy Prussia to Denmark. So that way, next year, I'll begin the turn with Sweden surrounded by 3 units, and there will not be a way for Russia to stop it without giving up some ground, at least in Great Britain. I also decided to move North Sea to Edinburgh, since there's a chance that Russia doesn't guard Edinburgh or Norway, and I thought about which one I would rather have if it worked, or which one seemed more likely. I don't know. It's a tough call. I decided to go with Edinburgh. I realized that I am leaving North Sea open to Russia sneaking in, but Russia can only sneak into North Sea by giving up a supply center to me. I think that's probably worth it to me since I would get a build and I can probably cover all my centers. It'll be a nightmare to be sure tactically, but I think there's a low chance of Russia going for North Sea since that would mean playing less defensively on the centers, and I still think I'd be better off if I captured Edinburgh. I also decided to move Wales to English Channel, supported by Mid-Atlantic Ocean, since I don't want to move Mid-Atlantic Ocean anywhere. And by moving Gascony to Brest, I set up for a convoy using English Channel, which could help me take down the rest of Great Britain later. And if Russia bounces me in Edinburgh, then it sets me up to double convoy using English Channel and North Sea into Yorkshire, which will give me the same opportunity down the road. That may even be a pretty good scenario, one that I can only pull off if I bounce Russia and Edinburgh. So I think now that I'm saying it, that's the reason why I decided to go for Edinburgh rather than Norway, because even if it fails, I'm set up for an interesting convoy the following year. I also decided to move Munich to Berlin and Burgundy to Munich to ensure the off chance that Russia moves there, that doesn't work, because that would be game over for me probably. I mean, I wouldn't be able to win if that happened. And I decided to backfill Burgundy with Marseille, since that gives me a few more options, like if I need to cover Belgium because I lost North Sea, and I don't intend to move Marseille to Piedmont, Austria. I've shut that down plenty of times. And I'm going to hold with Spain so that there's no possibility of England moving in there. I thought about this turn for probably several hours today, almost entirely playing out tactical scenarios in my mind and somewhat using the sandbox feature. There were so many options for me and different scenarios based on whether they go right or wrong. It's very difficult for me to judge this turn since the Russian is giving me nothing and I have no intelligence about what the Russian's going to do from the other players, at least nothing that I can act on. It feels pretty intense because I know that a solo win is within my grasp, but I also know that the other players know this, and I'll have to work pretty hard to set this up. Even though I got really excited last turn about the possibility and so on that I could solo win, I feel after having to think through so many tactical scenarios, I think right now that my chances are probably something like 10%, because it's still going to be pretty difficult for me to cross the stalemate line. Austria and Russia would have to make a big mistake, or someone would have to throw to me on purpose, and I don't really see any of that happening right now. Probably what I am on a trajectory to do at this moment is just consolidate control of the north. That's all I'm hoping for, and maybe from there some opportunity will arise in the future. Whoa! Oh boy, oh boy. Was I stunned by the Russian player's moves this turn. So, well, my analysis was way off, figuring out my moves. In fact, anything I would have done to attack the Russian would have worked, or at least it would have captured centers. The Russian didn't guard Liverpool, Edinburgh, Norway, or Sweden. None of that. I was completely wrong in my read. I thought the player was defending hard against me. Instead, the player only went for positions, including North Sea. I'm kicking myself that I didn't cover North Sea, because that's going to be a pain in the butt to get rid of that fleet in North Sea. The reason being that a fleet in North Sea has so many retreat options, probably, as far as I can tell, the most retreat options of any position anywhere on the board in diplomacy. But that aside, that the Russian player's strategic thinking is obviously way off from what I thought, that the player's trying to cede me centers in order to probably in order to power me up and force the game to a conclusion if other players get afraid of my solo win. That's really strange to me that the Russian player would do this without trying to tell me or hint that this was going to happen. And here's what I mean. If the Russian player wanted to power me up and is using my power to try to force the game to a draw, I sometimes call this strategy taking yourself hostage, where you threaten to power up one player and make them solo win if the other players don't stop fighting or attacking you. If the Russian player is trying to take himself hostage, then why didn't he encourage me to try to take his centers? I don't understand that. I'm not sure what I would have done, but that just would have been consistent with the strategy. So now this is a board that's kind of awkward for me to react to. I think the Italian and Austrian also had kind of weird reactions to this. The Italian said, "Oh, I thought this might be coming. I had a hint of it, but I didn't. It seemed not credible. I wasn't sure, so I didn't pass it to you." That's all. It's all very strange. And so even though I thought to myself, darn it, I could have had some better tactical moves here. I could have covered North Sea. I could have made some other captures. I could have done something. I managed to make that work out for me politically. I think I found a way to turn this around, especially talking to the Austrian, which is that even though the Russian player is clearly throwing centers my way, to power me up, I did not actually get more powerful. I didn't take that center in Portugal. I only picked up one center from the Russian. So I'm not that intimidating. I only have 12 supply centers, even though 5 more are easily within my reach. I only have 12. And so if the Austrian player is kind of hoping for some possibility that they can catch up, or maybe one day he'll be the one to be the bigger threat or something, that hope is still, I hope, a little bit alive. So combine the fact that I only got one capture, even though I only got one capture, with the fact that the Austrian and English player did not successfully pick a center off of Italy. That looks a little bit good for me. I think that works out because now Italy's still alive and kicking at 3 centers. Austria didn't get a build. It means Austria has to stay concentrated on trying to bring down Italy if Austria wants to make gains. So that's just my good fortune, I suppose, that they I don't know how much I intervened in this. I did pressure the Austrian to support the English player until Ionian Sea, but I didn't know that was going to happen, or leak it to the Italian or something. So wow, what is going on with this game? I got my build. I think that the only reasonable choice here is an army. I've already got 5 fleets, and going 6 fleets when I only have 12 units as Germany, that seems kind of crazy, especially when I'm, it's possible that the Russian, I guess more increasingly, I think the Austrian might change his mind and come fight me. I want to have that army. And however, I will build it in Kiel, number 1, to not threaten the Austrian since Munich is empty. Nice. And the other, that I probably want to have at least the ability to cover Holland in case I have to deal with North Sea next year and somehow kicking that unit out. The Italian is just off begging me, please come attack, please attack the Austrian, I'll help you win, etc. I think as soon as I go for the solo win, the Italian will try to fight for the draw. Honestly do. I don't believe that the player is really going to try to throw me the game. Most players who are good, such as that player, do not do that. So that doesn't really matter that much to me. I do have a concern about what the Russians' disband is going to be, but I could not figure out how I could influence it. The Russian could disband a unit in the south and keep the forces in the north concentrated against me and give opportunity for Austria to maybe attack. Or the Russian player could disband in the north, maybe even North Sea. Maybe they'll disband that unit and make it clear that I'm going to be powered up. The Italian player, for his part, said, I'll do everything I can to convince the Russian to disband North Sea, since I do think that would be the most consistent with the strategy he's going for. We'll see what happens. I really don't know. The Russian player did respond to my message where I said, hey, if you're trying to throw the game to me or power me up, shouldn't we coordinate a little bit? And the Russian said, okay, I see what you're saying. If you don't cross the stalemate line, or you stay away from the stalemate line, then yeah, powering you up in this way could be something that I agree to. And that may be what I do, and here's why. I need to cross the stalemate line in order to solo it. I gotta capture Tunis, Venice, Vienna. Warsaw, Moscow seem really unlikely. But I need to have a consolidated grip on the north really fast so that if I make a lunge from one of those centers, I'll actually be able to get to 18 and not say get into Vienna, but only be at 17 and then get knocked out of Vienna at the time that I pick up the last northern center and then still get stuck at 17. So I do want to get strong in the north faster, but also with some opportunity that I can get to jump somewhere. If I'm going to solo win, I'm going to have to get a jump start by moving into Piedmont, Tyrolia, or somehow get near Tunis. So I have that in mind. Maybe the Russian might have a mutual interest, and the Russian player will clear out of the north in some organized way. So in terms of my tactics, it's very simple. I'm going to build an army in Kiel and see what happens. The Italian player advised me that the Austrian is not really like, hey, the Austrian's not really trying to help you. We're having conversations behind your back, and it's pretty clear to me that the Austrian's got one eye on you at all times. And I appreciate that. The Austrian player, also clarified that he's not trying to help me solo win. He's just got a different attitude about how much he's willing to risk. So I think that I appreciate what the Italian player is saying. It's probably accurate. I still think that I want to work with the Austrian as best I can. And let's see if the Italian, the Austrian, and the Russian all view me as someone to work with rather than to fight against. Maybe some opportunity will come. Maybe they'll frustrate each other and try to throw me the game. I can hope.